This is the video for the August 2024 Algebra Regents exam short response questions. In question number 25, this is a 2-credit question. On the set of axes below, graph the following equation: x squared plus 4x plus 1. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take this equation, x squared plus 4x plus 1, and type it into your y equals on your calculator. Hit second and table for your points. When you take a look at the table, the points are 1, 6, over to 1, up to 6, 0, 1, over to -1, down to -2, over to -2, down to -3, over to -3, down to -2, over to -4, up to +1, and over to -5, up to +6. Connect the dots to form your U-shaped graph. Make sure that you have arrows on the ends and make sure that you label your graph. That's worth 1 credit. The second part says state the coordinates of the min. The min is the vertex. The min is the lowest part of the graph. That's the opposite of max. So the min is pointing at that point right there. That point is over to -2, down to -3. When you write it as coordinates, you have to have the parentheses around your coordinate and you have to have a comma. So -2, -3. 1 point for the graph, 1 point for the coordinate -2, -3. In question number 26, if f of x equals that mess, determine the value of the f of 1/2. I went ahead right away and changed my 1/2 into a decimal, top divided by bottom. So that equals 0.5. You then want to take and sub in your 0.5 in for the x and in for the x. So 30 times 0.5 squared all over 0.5 plus 2. Now you have to be careful. If you try to put this all into the calculator all at once, because you have a time sign and because you have a plus sign, you have to type it in with parentheses around the numerator and parentheses around the denominator. If you don't type in the parentheses into your calculator, you will get the wrong answers. I chose to do it doing just the top calculation, 30 times 0.5 squared, and got 7.5. 0.5 plus 2 for the bottom part, which is 2.5. Then you just have to do top divided by bottom. 7.5 divided by 2.5 is 3. In question number 27, another 2-credit question, 1 point for the top part, 1 point for the bottom part. Explain why the relation shown in the table is a function. It tells you it is a function. This is not one of those questions where, is it a function, yes or no? It's telling you it is a function. They want to know why it is. Well, there's 2 different reasons that you could say. First of all, you could say that all of the x values are all different, -1, 0, and 2, or there's no repeated x values, something to that effect. The other reason that you could say is that if you graph the points, which are these blue dots right here, if you graph those points, it passes the vertical line test. The vertical line test says that if there's 2 dots right directly above each other, it is not a function. All the dots are separately. There's no 2 dots that are right above each other, so it passes the vertical line test. So either of those 2 answers, perfectly fine. The second credit comes from the bottom part. Complete the table below with the values for both x and y to make it not a function. So they want to know what number can you put here and here to make it not a function. Well, all that you need to do is repeat one of the x values, because if it's not a function, it has repeated x values. So in this spot right here for the x, you could either put -1, 0, 1, or 2. I chose to put 2. It honestly does not matter what number at all you put in the y. That's irregardless of the question. You have to put something there, though. You can't just leave it blank. But either a -1, 0, 1, or 2 in here, and then any number that you want right there. Because then you'd have 2 x values that are the same. So 1 point for the top, 1 point for the bottom. In question number 28, you're solving the equation algebraically for x. So what we want to do is first do the distributive property to get rid of the parentheses. 0.05 times x, 0.05 times -3. We get 0.05x minus 0.15. This next step, you do have your choice. I chose to subtract the smaller of the two letters. So I chose to do minus 0.05x from both sides, but you could have added 0.15 to both sides or subtracted 0.35x from both sides or added 7.5 to both sides. So anyway, I chose to subtract the smaller of the two letters, minus 0.05, bring down your negative 0.15 equals 0.30x minus 7.5. Now it's just a two-step equation. Add 7.5, add 7.5, divide by 0.30 on both sides, so you get an answer of 24.5. In question number 29, use the quadratic formula. It says you must use the quadratic formula to determine the exact roots. When it says exact, they want it in radical form. Exact is not rounding to the nearest tenth. When you round, that's really an approximation. So when it says exact, they want it in simplest radical form. Your A value is 1, your B value is 3, your C value is -6. So sub those numbers into the formula. Remember that the quadratic formula is on your reference sheet. So -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times -6 all over 2 times 1. When you multiply these numbers together, you get 33. So -3 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2. 33 can't be simplified. So that's as far as we can go. In question number 30, factor this completely. Well, there's no C value. Since there's no C value, I can't do reverse FOIL how it is right now. Since there's no C value, what I want to do is I want to factor out the greatest common factor. I want to look and see what number goes in evenly to 5 and 80. Well, the number that goes in evenly to 5 and 80 is 5. So 5 goes outside the parentheses. I can also take out an x from each term because there's 3 x's here, 1 x here. I can take out an x from each term. So the next thing that I want to do is that goes outside. That's your greatest common factor. If I did the distributive property now, 5x times x squared, because you really add your x's together to be x to the third, is 5x to the third. 5x times what is -80x? Well, 5 times -16 is -80. And then we just add our x, so -16. Now what I want to look at is I want to do reverse FOIL to this. What times what is -16? That adds up to 0. My B value would be 0. Well, that's really the difference of two perfect squares, x plus 4 and x minus 4. What do you do with your greatest common factor? We just need to bring that down, bring that straight down. So this is our final answer, 5x times x plus 4 times x minus 4. In question number 31, this is our first 4-credit question. The owner of an ice cream stand kept track of the number of ice cream cones that were sold each day of the first week of June. She compared the ice cream sales to the average daily temperature, and that's shown in the chart below. The first thing that we want to do is type this into our stat edit L1 and L2. Stat calc number 4 for linear regression. It says state the linear regression equation. Equations have equal signs. You have to have y equals. If you did not put the y equals, the most that you can get is 3 out of 4. Rounding all values to the nearest hundredth. To the nearest hundredth is 2 decimal places. So when you type it in, your A value would round to 15.13 and your B value would round to -959.63. So y equals 15.13. Don't forget your x after your A value minus 959.63. Be careful. You have to look and see whether your B value is a positive or a negative. If it was a positive, this would have been a plus, but it's a negative, so therefore it's a minus. That gets you 2 credits right there out of the 4. The second part says state the correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient is your R value. Now, if you did your stat calc number 4, linear regression, and forgot to turn on your stat diagnostics by going to the mode button, your R value would not show up. You have to make sure that your stat diagnostics is turned on for your R value to show up. When you do it, you get R equals 0.99. That's worth 1 credit. The 4th credit comes from state whether this correlation coefficient indicates, or what this correlation coefficient indicates about the linear fit of the data. Well, if it's close to 1, or if it's close to -1, it is a strong correlation. This one is positive, so it's a strong positive correlation. That means that it's a good fit for the data. You have to say strong positive correlation. In question number 32, there's another 4 credit question. You get 1 credit for graphing the one equation correctly, 1 credit for graphing the other equation correctly, 1 credit for, be careful, label the solution set with an S that's in the double shaded area, and then 1 question for the bottom part. So in order to graph this, I'm going to type this first equation into my y equals, and then second in table for my points. Because it is greater than, you use a dotted line to connect the dots. Make sure you have arrows on both ends, and make sure that you label your line. If you do not label, if you do not have arrows, you do not get full credit. For the second equation, it's not in that y equals form. So we need to rearrange it for y equals minus x, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Be careful right here. There's really a -1 in front of that x. So that's really -1/2 x, or -0.5 x plus 3. We do have an or equal to on this one. So when you type it into your y equals and you hit second in table, you're connecting the dots with a solid line this time. Arrows on both ends, and make sure that you label it. We are shading down below because it's less than. So down below, down below, down below. In the previous question, it was greater than, so it was up above, up above, up above. That creates this double shaded area right in here. You had to label it with the letter S. So you need that letter S right here in the double shaded area. Is the point 22 a solution? Justify your answer. Here's the point 22 right here. Right, let me highlight it so it stands out a little bit. This is the point 22, over to 2, up to 2. Is that point a solution? The answer is no. Why? Because it is on a dotted line. Dotted lines are not in the solution set. If it was in this double shaded area, sure, that's a solution. If both lines were solid lines, yes, it would be a solution. In question number 33, another 4 credit question. What you want to do is an object is launched upward at 64 feet per second from a platform 80 feet above. The function s of t models the height of the object t seconds after launch. They give you the equation for s of t, -t squared, plus 64t plus 80. State the vertex. So state the coordinates of the vertex. That's going to be your min or your max. And explain in detail what each coordinate means. So that's where we're going to get 3 credits from. 1 credit from the vertex, or sorry, 1 credit for your x value, 1 credit for your y value, 1 credit for the explain in detail, and then 1 credit for this bottom part. All right. So what I would do is I would type this into my y equals, and then hit graph. You might use zoom 0 for zoom fit. This is what the graph looks like. Second calc number 4 to calculate the max. You got to click on the left-hand side, click on the right-hand side, and then hit enter a 3rd time for guess. It's going to give you the coordinates of the max, which is 2, 144. You have to write it with parentheses and with a comma. So that's the state the coordinates of the vertex part. What does it mean? Well, the 2 means that the object at 2 seconds, because time goes across the bottom, at 2 seconds, the object is 144 feet in the air. It's at its max height, or it's at its highest point at 2 seconds and 144 feet in the air. After the object is launched, how many seconds for it to take to hit the ground? Hit the ground is this point. on your graph where the graph crosses the x-axis. You can find the x-intercept, all right? The x-intercept is at 5, 0, so it takes 5 seconds. You do have to justify your answer there by saying like the x-intercept is 5, 0. In question number 34, another 4 credit question. I would say that you would get 1 credit for 1x value, 1 credit for 1x value. Then you have to find your y and your y also. So find all values of x and y. What you want to do is you want to set them equal to each other. One equation equals the other because you have a y equals and a y equals equation. So set them equal to each other, get the one side equal to 0. Why we want one side set equal to 0 is because then we could do completing the square. We can solve by factoring. We could do the quadratic formula, but you have to have it set equal to 0 first. So I chose to do minus 2x and minus 2x, minus 7 and minus 7. Line them up and then add going down. 4 plus negative 2 is 2. Negative 1 plus negative 7 is negative 8. Now that you have this trinomial, now you can solve by factoring. What times what is negative 8? That adds up to 2. Well, it's 4 and negative 2. Draw your line down the middle, set both sides equal to 0, and solve. You get negative 4 and 2. That gets you 2 credits. If you wanted to, instead of doing solving by factoring at this point, we could do the quadratic formula. Sub in the numbers where they belong, crank out your answer. Remember, be careful. When you get down and you split it, you have to have parentheses around the upper part if you go to type in the whole thing all at once. I would just do the top part, then do the bottom part and divide. We get the same 2 answers, 2 and negative 4. Now that you got those answers, now you want to sub it back in to find y. So we can take those 2 answers and sub it in for x. We're subbing it into the x value for one of the equations. If you wanted to use the top equation, you could, but the bottom one's easier. So 2 times negative 4 plus 7 is negative 1. So that's another answer. 2 times 2 plus 7 is 11. So that's our other answer. So we have 2, 11, and negative 4, negative 1. In question number 35, this is our 6 credit question. Jen joined the fan favorite movie club at the local movie theater. At this theater, the cost of admission in May and June remains the same. In May, she saw 2 matinees and 3 regular price shows and spent $38.50. In June, she went to 6 matinees and 1 regular price show and spent $47.50. Write a system of equations to represent the cost M of matinee. You have to use the letter M, and the cost R, you have to use the letter R of a regular price ticket. If you don't use M and R, you can't get credit. So we have 2 matinees, 2M plus 3 regular, 3R for $38.50, 6M plus 1R for $47.50. Here's your system. That gets you 2 credits right there. The third credit comes from Jen spent $5.75 on each matinee and $9 on a regular price. Is she correct? All right, that's what she said she spent. We want to know if she's correct or not. Well, what you're going to do is sub those in for M and R. All right, sub in your $5.75 for M, your 9 for R. When you sub it into the first equation, it looks like it works. However, when you sub it into the second equation, it does not check. All right, we get $43.50 on one side, $47.50 on the other side. So it does not check. Therefore, it is not the correct answer. All right, because it doesn't check. Use your system to determine the actual cost. So now they want you to actually find it. So we got 2 credits for setting it up, 1 credit for doing the check, 1 credit for saying no. And then we want to find M and R for the 5th and 6th credit. So I want to actually solve this original system. So I just took this original system and I rewrote it down here. What I want to do is I want to multiply to create opposites. I want to multiply to either cancel out the M's or cancel out the R's. I chose to cancel out the R's by multiplying this bottom equation, distribute, 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 by -3, because I want to create a 3R and a -3R. If you wanted to, you could have multiplied the top equation by -3 to get a -6m and 6m. That's fine. Just make sure whichever way you do it, distribute, distribute, distribute. So then I add going down and those r's cancel out. So I get -16m equals -104. Divide by -16. I get m equals 6.5. That's $6.50. All right. You could leave it as 6.5. It's fine. Then take that and sub it back in to one of the equations. It doesn't matter. I chose the top equation and subbed it in for m. Solve that equation and you get r equals 850. So hopefully you got enough credits to pass. 65 is a passing score. You needed 28 credits total.